Kia ora koutou. It's so lovely to see you all here today for this session. Tēnā koutou, ko Tania Miller, taku ingoa. Welcome to this session, Marlborough Book Festival, for a time traveller's guide to history with our author Lauren Keenan. Lauren is a writer and historian from Te Whanganui a Tara, Wellington City, though she has lived in Dunedin, New Plymouth and more recently Honolulu. Lauren has a desire to visit 50 countries before she's 50. Her books include a work of non-fiction called The 52-Week Project, How I Fixed My Life by Trying a New Thing Every Week for a year, and a historical novel set in colonial Taranaki called The Space Between. She has also written 2 books for children featuring time-travelling siblings, Amorangi and Millie, called Amorangi and Millie's Trip Through Time and Amorangi and Millie and Rimu, The Tree of Time. She's currently working on a 3rd instalment, as well as another historical novel for adults. She's obviously a very hard-working writer. Tēnā koutou, Lauren, and welcome.
Lovely to be here.
Did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I guess just to start from the start, ko Taranaki maunga ko waiwa ko awango ngati tuiti, o tiatiawa ki Taranaki o. Ki tiatiawa ki te waka a Māui hoki, Te Whanganui a Tara tuku kāinga anai nei, ko Lauren Keenan tuku ingoa. I am a kaituhi, as a writer. I love the Māori word for writer, kaituhi, because it literally means like eat the words. And when you say I'm a busy, industrious writer, I mean, I'm not really, I'm probably more slightly obsessive when it comes to feeling like I'm eating the words. It's pinging on my screen, so it's definitely part of my method. But it's lovely to be here. Blenheim, the weather is so nice here. My mum was saying to me, I think I might retire in Blenheim, and I'm like, yeah, please. Absolute delight. So thank you for having me.
So Lauren, first off, where did your love of history come from?
Where did my love of history come from? I'm from a family of massive history nerds. I think that's definitely part of it. But it did come for me from fiction. I read Anne of Green Gables when I was about 11, and it was the first book I ever cried in, and I just loved it. And at a similar time, I read a lot of books set in the past. I read The Little House on the Prairie. I read so much Enid Blyton, and a lot of that was set in, the romping through the cornfields with lashes of ginger beer and the boarding schools and things, which for me in the 80s was historic fiction, I suppose. I read this book once about, it was set in like Egypt many, many, many years ago, like in the Cleopatra times, and I don't even remember the book, but I still remember the characters and how cool everything was. And I think from that, I guess it was the seed that just grew into a lifelong love of the past that I then kind of followed academically and as a personal interest.
And were teachers reading historical stories to you at school? Like, did you get to quench that thirst in primary school?
Not particularly.
Secondary school?
In secondary school, I got to do history as a subject. 5th form, that's probably dating me a little bit, my age. But in 5th form, I did do history, and I had a really good history teacher. He was a bit radical. He didn't believe in desks. So he had us sit in a circle, and he used to get us to talk about these historical ideas, and it was so exciting, and all of a sudden, these things felt relevant. And one of the things that motivates me now is I had such a good teacher of history, and I was really lucky. And I really want other tamariki now to realise just how interesting our past can be. It's not all boring encyclopedias and pictures of dudes with like massive moustaches and giant beards that seem completely irrelevant to them.
And what school was that?
It was Freiburg High School in Palmerston North.
What was it called again?
Freiburg High School.
Freiburg.
In Palmerston North was where I went to high school. Most recently the news for doing a haka to David Seymour. Same school. Yeah.
And the teacher would sit you down and tell you stories?
Yes.
How lucky were you?
It was awesome. But then some teachers complained, and then we had to do desks. But by then I'd benefited from a good couple of years of his teaching.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, but also, hang on, Wasn't your dad a historian?
My dad is a historian.
That's who I thought you meant when you said I had a really good history teacher.
It's funny, it's like the circle of life or doom when you're a kid and you're going to these historic sites. And my dad likes to tell the story about me walking to Rangihoa, it's called. It's in the Bay of Islands. In 1814, it was the very first missionary service when Samuel Marsden came to New Zealand. It's one of the first, most important moments of our history. And my parents like to remind me that I threw this massive sock about my sun hat and I threw it into a paddock and then I climbed in and there's all these dramas and they've got a photo of me sitting there like this. And now I have children, I take the historic sites and the circle continues. But then at some point in my life I kind of realised that it was actually really interesting and it's a real privilege. And I don't know how many of you heard Rachel King talk last night about her own father and just what a gift it is to have people that tell you these stories, and that really did resonate with me as well from having a historian parent myself. And I do hope that photo of me sucking in the paddock in one of our most historical sites gets destroyed at some point.
And so is your father Pākehā or Māori?
Māori.
But he took you to all different sites over New Zealand, possibly?
He did. And my dad was Māori, kei te tiatiao ia. My mum is Pākehā, but her family came in the first Wakefield ship into Nelson.
Ah.
And her people grew up near Dovedale, a place near Nelson, and they also talk a lot about history. It's unverified, but in my whānau they say that I have ancestors on both sides of the Wairoa Fray. I'm still going through the process of trying to verify that, because family legend does things that sometimes the truth in a good story sometimes kind of deviates slightly. But that's certainly my connection to this region as well.
Is that partly why you wrote Amorangi Millie stories? Did you find anything else? Were you looking around thinking, is there any other stories that I can, or my children can read that tell Aotearoa New Zealand history?
That was absolutely part of it. I started off writing, my first historical fiction I wrote was about the London Blitz, because I'd been told that if I ever wanted to write history, it needed to be set overseas, because no one wanted to read New Zealand history.
Did a publisher tell you that?
It was someone within the industry told me that. And I wrote this book. I didn't even really finish it because it wasn't particularly good. There was no heart. There's no heart in it. And I just didn't write history again for many, many years, because the histories I wanted to write about, I thought were histories no one wanted to read about. And then when my kids were younger, I suddenly kind of came back to it, and I wrote a book for them first and foremost, because Amorangi and Millie's trip through time, my children are called Amotai and Lili Reima. So I wasn't even particularly imaginative with mixing up their names. And I initially wrote it for them, and just the fact that someone else wanted to read it and publish it is just a source of utmost delight for me.
Had you always written?
I wrote my first, we went to the schools yesterday and they asked me that same question, and I told them about I don't know if I'll ever write a book with as much critical appeal as when I was 8 and I wrote a story about monkeys that escaped from the zoo, because I named the monkeys after the teachers. And everyone
Kids loved that.
Yeah, and I told, when I went out to the primary schools yesterday, I told them that story, and then they told me afterwards we're going to write stories about our teachers, and I thought, don't blame me for that later, or maybe they can. But I've always written, just in various things, academic, non-academic. I write, it's part of my job. I work in government as part of my job, so I write a lot of government documents as part of that. I love short-form journalism. I just like writing anything, really.
And when do you do that in your day? Like, if you've got a day job and you've got 2 children and it's all going on?
I think I've never been someone who has get up an hour early and write for 45 minutes kind of vibe. Every book's been a bit different, I think, in terms of its journey. These were the lockdown novels, these 2. I was living in Hawaii at the time. We were in lockdown for an entire year.
In Hawaii.
In Hawaii. And I know that when you say you live in Hawaii, people aren't terribly sympathetic about anything you have to say up to that point. But
what did that lockdown look like?
We'd just moved there. We'd been there about a month when COVID happened and the borders closed, and we couldn't come back to New Zealand for some time. And because we'd just moved there, I can't think of a way of saying this without sounding like a loser, but we had no friends, had no family. So it just was this strange... What,
you mean you didn't know people in Honolulu?
I knew. And I got to know people over the time, but all of a sudden I felt like I had a lot more free time because I didn't have other calls on my time apart from parenting, work. So then writing became a good way of actually channeling homesickness. So I wrote about my home because I couldn't visit my home. And that was one of the things that kept me going because you feel a bit sad. And there was one day when, in writing in Rimu as well, there was one day when I missed out on the MIQ ballot. And I felt really stink about that. And I was like, I'm never going to get home ever. I'm stuck away forever. And while I was happy that my parents were safe from the COVID situation that we were seeing playing out in America, I then just went to my computer and wrote about my home, and it just made it feel closer. So.
And were you telling the stories to, I'm sorry, I've forgotten what's your two children?
Amotai and Lily Raymer.
Amotai and Lily Raymer.
Yeah, I was. I read Amorangi and Millie to them I'd kind of drop it chapter at a time.
Yeah.
But then they got a bit critical because they're...
Because they're kids.
Because they're kids. They're kids. And with the Rimu, I had written the whole thing before I read it to them. And their critical feedback was quite important to me, actually. We had some robust conversations about various characters, including whether one was indeed super cringe. Yeah, they're great, though. They're the best editors in the world.
And was Trip Through Time, was that your story? Was that your tipuna, your ancestors?
It was my story. So
it was their story too?
It was their story as well. And the first thing I wrote was, I had this conversation with my kids once, and this must play out for a lot of people. They didn't believe me when I told them that in my day, there was only 3 channels on TV. And they were like, what? But what if you need to go away? What if you need to use the bathroom? And I was like, well, then you just run real fast in the ads.
You wait till the ads.
Wait till the ads. And then my mum was telling them that in her day, she doesn't actually talk like that, just for dramatic effect. She had a TV with no colour, And what I wanted to do kind of on a micro level is history isn't that long ago. And the first chapter I wrote in here was the chapter when they go back in time and they meet their mother at their age in a house that's exactly like the house I had, with a big fat TV, exactly like the big fat TV we used to have. And one of the moments of tension is when a phone rings and they don't know what it is because it goes bring, bring rather than making other little sounds. And I also wanted to tell the story about iwi history in our whakapapa because, in Te Ao Māori we often talk about the tupuna on your shoulders to guide you, they're with you. And the idea of going back in that unbroken chain is an idea that's always really appealed to me, that we're not just in this moment in time by accident. We all have family and parents and parents and parents and parents, and going back all these generations, further usually than we can recount, and just wanting to capture a little bit of that to help our children solidify their own identity and who they are, and to be proud of that regardless of where their family have come from.
And it's interesting for kids because they can't, when they see their old grandparents or their old parents, it's hard for them to think about them as kids.
It is. It is. And one thing that I've really discovered while talking to kids and writing for kids is there's a lot that's different, but there's more that's the same. I went to this museum. I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Toy Museum in London. It's an amazing, it's filled with historic toys. They have a rocking horse in there that Charles I rode, apparently. I mean, it's slightly dark because the rocking horse has no head, and Charles I was in fact beheaded as well. So if I take my kids there, I'm not telling them that story. But it was filled with all these toys that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. So children like to play. They would have had hopes, dreams. They would have got stroppy and tired and excited and curious.
And in fact, in one of the instances where Amorangi and Millie go back to in time, they meet Amorangi.
The first Amorangi, yeah.
And they talk about, because they're working,
yeah.
And Amorangi talks about not wanting to go to school, and Rangi's like, I wish I could go to school. Yeah. These kids didn't even, or they didn't go to school full time. They might have gone to school a little bit.
Yeah. And I just wanted my kids to kind of understand that, because my grandmother, Rona Wynne was her name. She grew up on a farm near Dovedale, so not so far from here. And she had to leave school when she was 12 because she had younger siblings. And it's a story that's played out a lot. So I just want to I think of it as learning by stealth. That my kids often don't want to go to school, but it's still a privilege to be able to go to school, and just to give them the moment to maybe appreciate that.
Mm. Lauren, will you read a little bit of were you going to read some of the first Amorangi Millie?
Whichever I can. I
think you're going to read right at the beginning just to give us a taster.
I'll just do the very beginning of this.
Thank you.
It's the very beginning. Amorangi Millie Strip Through Time. It's funny talking about having written this through COVID, because whenever I read it, I can see the exact house that I saw, nothing but its interior for like a month, in these words as well, which is a great reminder of how writing lasts in your mind in a certain kind of way as it does on the page. Okay. Amorangi didn't mean to lose his mum, especially not while walking to school on a Tuesday morning. Mum was supposed to make sure he didn't get lost, not the other way around. Mum was never meant to accidentally end up in the olden days, trapped until Amorangi and his little sister Millie could find her and set her free. It was a bright, fine morning. Amorangi walked with Mum and Millie out of their house and down the hill toward the school. Before they had gone too far, they arrived at the shortcut, which passed through some trees, past a giant Rimu and down a small hill. At the bottom of the hill was a bridge that crossed the stream. Today is a special day, Mum said. Do you know why? It's not a special day, Amorangi said. I have to do maths. That makes it a dumb day. I want to stay home and play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate instead on my Nintendo. I think it's a special day, said Millie. I've got ballet. It's also a special day because it's Grandma's birthday, Mum said. Amorangi fell silent, remembering Grandma Amelia. He really missed her. Their house was strange without her living in it. There was a big Grandma Amelia-sized hole that nothing could fill. If I could go back in time, I'd visit her, Amorangi said. Me too, said Millie. She had my name too. Millie is short for Amelia. I think you had her name, not the other way around, Amorangi said crossly. She came first, not you. Millie poked out her tongue at her brother. Amorangi poked out his tongue back. He then turned back to see if Mum had seen, but she hadn't. Lucky. I wish I could travel back through time, Mum said, reaching to touch the pounamu she wore around her neck. I wish I could see Grandma Amelia again on her birthday. The kids nodded. They'd love to see her, even just for once. I wish I could travel back in time, Mum said again. As Amorangi continued along the path, a flash caught his eye. What was that? Millie walked in front of him, the lights on her new sneakers flashing with every step she took. That's what the strange brightness must have been. Millie's sneakers. He kept walking. I hate school, Amorangi said, all thoughts of strange brightness forgotten. I wish I didn't have to go. Mum said nothing. That was strange. Amorangi waited for Mum to say, you don't have to like school, but you have to go anyway, like she did every other morning. But she didn't. How unusual. Why hadn't she said anything? Amorangi spun around and looked back at the bridge. He blinked. The bridge was empty. Mum was gone.
Is that the first bit that you wrote? in the whole story?
It was the first book I wrote.
And was it a natural progression for the whole book? Like, did you write chapter by chapter? Or did you write bits here and bits there and then put them together like a puzzle?
I mostly wrote it in order. I tend to write books in order, partly because I'm not very well organised. Yeah.
And the story's lovely because they keep coming back to that place. Well, they find so she writes them a special message on the Rimu tree.
She does.
And then it fades kind of, so it sort of starts off very very fresh and then it fades. And so then they find out a way to follow her back in time, but then they get a bit lost on the way.
Yes.
And then every time they come to a new place, it's like a historical event, right?
Yeah, it is. And they follow their family tree backwards, back 6 generations to find their mum, who all they know is that she's in the past, help me.
And because it's a children's book, it probably has a happy ending.
Yeah. It never would have got through my young editors if it had had any sort of mortality of children or badness or all that
Even
sort of thing.
J.K. Rowling couldn't pull that one off.
Yeah.
How did you get it published?
I was lucky to be on the Papatupu program for Huia Publishers back in 2016, which is an incubation program for Māori writers who are just starting out. And I had written a collection of short stories as part of that process that they opted not to publish in the end. But because of having participated on that program, they knew who I was. So I just sent them the manuscript and said, are you interested in this? And they said yes with many changes. No, they said, if you make many changes, maybe. And I remember thinking, is it worth it? But then I was in lockdown, it's not like I could go anywhere else. So I decided to just jump in there, and I'm really pleased that I did.
Because Hui are quite niche.
They are.
They don't have, do you know how many books they publish in a year?
Not many, but enough. And they do really well in the kids' fiction at the moment.
And the production of that book is just incredible. Even in, I have to say, with the second one, so with the Rimu, the pages are beautiful and thick, and they've almost got that lovely yellow kind of patina to them. I don't know. It's really, really well done. It's good to see. Do you think that, I don't know how to phrase this question, is Māori history the same as Pākehā history in Aotearoa New Zealand?
I think it's hard for me to say because I whakapapa both to Māori and Pākehā sides. I think the framing of it, how it's written traditionally, can be a little bit different. Like, I think a lot of traditional Māori history predates the written word. You know, it came through waiata and moteatea, comes through the pai and how people speak. And I've really found this recently. I've been writing a non-fiction book actually on history, on various historical events, and I'm looking at a lot of events and looking at the traditional record. And I think a good way of explaining it is that I'll find a lot of letters written by European settlers, I'll find a lot of newspaper articles, I'll find a lot of traditional archives. But in some instances, the only thing I've managed to find about how Māori would have perceived it is I find a waiata. You know, a waiata that was sung for the next 50 years that someone has recorded. It talks about the event in question. So I think sometimes the stories are told in different ways. And I think they centre sometimes around slightly different things. But I think it's also a hard thing to answer because history has been traditionally so incredibly centred around men. Like, it's been very hard to find women in history that aren't royals. You know, my awesome history teacher I talked about before set us a challenge once. He said, I want to find you a woman in a history book that's not there because there's someone's wife, someone's daughter, or a queen. And it was actually all Kate Shepherd. He said, it was actually really hard to find them as well. So it's really hard for me to kind of talk in general terms, I think, about what the different kinds of histories are. Because history as a discipline has changed in my lifetime as well, in terms of the kind of things we look at and how we tell our stories.
And so that brings me to the adult novel that you wrote. So does the space between relate in any way to Amorangi and Millie's story?
Well, they're both, you know, I'm Te Aotearoa Taranaki, you know, grew up in Ngā Mutu, and I think for me, I needed to start writing in my own place before I could write about other places. And now I'm writing outside of my area that I'm from. But it's taken me a little while to get the confidence to do that. So the similarity with the space between in the Amorangi and Millie books is they're still centred around Te Aotearoa history, they're still centred around Taranaki. But as I said, I'm slowly moving kind of backwards from that.
But you wrote it in Honolulu, just going back to Amorangi and Millie for a moment. When did you write this book?
I also wrote that one
at the same time.
I started writing it in Honolulu, but I finished most of it when I got back to Wellington.
Was that tricky being, like, how long had it been since you lived in New Plymouth?
I haven't lived in New Plymouth since I was probably in my early teens. But we go back a lot.
So you knew the place
I know
pretty
the place
well.
pretty well, yeah.
So you're able to picture, because it's really, I mean, there's even a map in the beginning.
Oh, that map was really hard, by the way. I had like this Google map and this other thing, because the coastline has completely changed. Like there's all this been reclamation for the port, and that made the map quite difficult. But maybe I'm just useless with technology.
No, I appreciate a really good map in a book, and it was really good to see, be able to see where you were describing the places that you were describing. So the bridge and the Rimu tree, do they exist?
The bridge does. It actually exists in Wellington, and it is around the corner from our house. There are a lot of trees there, but no Rimu tree. It was originally a tuatara tree, but one of my very first editors, I say editor, but person I knew that read it was like, they're not there far south. And I was like, I looked into it and decided to do a Rimu tree anyway. But the bridge does exist. It's a little stream. I mean, the way the stories have been told, it's kind of become a bit bigger and more epic, I think, in the books than the real one.
And isn't that the beauty of writing fiction? Is that you don't have to, it doesn't have to be true?
That's true, but I guess it's inspired by something.
Yeah. Does the Rimu tree have any other significance to you, personally?
Only in as much that I really do, native trees.
Yeah.
And just knowing how long they've existed for. And I think the sequel, the Rimu, goes a little bit more into the history of trees. Like, trees are really old. And it's just amazing to think, what could this tree have seen?
We have a lot of kahikatea in Marlborough. I don't know, would it have been Kōri, maybe, in Taranaki?
Kōri, the Rimu, and also, you think about trees too. I went out to Wairau this morning just because I wanted to visit the historic site, and I see there's a tree there. It's this very exact same tree that Te Parihaka and his men tied their waka to.
What kind of tree is it?
I can't remember, but I got a photo.
Cool. A titoki tree.
Yeah. But the exact tree is the same tree. And it kind of goes to this wider idea of our natural environment. We're talking about histories and people, but also history of the geology, the nature, the trees. They are also old. There's this tree near Aotearoa that I visited once. It's over 2,000 years old. I just love to think about what that tree's seen.
It's amazing, isn't it? I recently have been in Bay of Plenty, and I went up Papamoa Hill. I don't know if you've ever been up Papamoa Hill, and it just felt it's actually 3 different power sites, and it's a beautiful part of the world, but they obviously have the power site up there so they could see over the whole of the coast, and I just had this sudden feeling of, wow, I just feel really, I could think of all of the people. Possibly I was reading your book. And I was thinking about all of the people that would have been standing there in the past before me. History's cool like that.
History's very cool.
The space between, where did Mataria and Francis come from?
Where did they come from? I'm a massive fan of Jane Austen. I know that people don't expect me to say that when they think of a colonial history set in New Zealand.
What's your favourite Jane Austen?
Pride and Prejudice. Even though every time I read it, Mr. Bennet just seems a bit more of a douche. And I'm still making peace with that within myself. And then Persuasion. But I could talk about that for ages, so I should probably just go back to the question. I've always, I loved the Jane Austen books, but they always felt very other, from far away. And then one day I was just thinking about it, and I realised that Jane Austen, so the Bennets, right, the Bennet sisters in Pride and Prejudice, they could have immigrated to New Zealand.
Yeah.
They could have, as older women.
But if they'd fallen on hard times, possibly.
Or decided to seek their fortune or for all the things. And I just thought, imagine the Bennet sisters in colonial New Zealand. What would they have made of, like, a kaka, these giant birds, or the wildlife, or the untamed land? Because in those books they talk about Derbyshire being untamed. I was like, they never would have seen New Zealand if that's untamed, because it's only got like 3 little stone fences. Can you just imagine? And that was the basis for Frances as a character. Just this British family who had fallen on hard times, and they come to this place on the other side of the world, and their class structure that's kept them upright is completely gone, and how they're able to just transplant and the difficulty associated with that. So that's where the kind of seed for the character of Frances and her family came from. And from Mataria, I always wanted to write a book with from a Māori perspective. A lot of her stuff came from when I did my Masters in History. I did my Masters on the Taranaki Waitangi Tribunal claim. And as part of that, I had to read a lot of submissions to the Waitangi Tribunal. There was a lot of oral submissions from kaumātua about what had happened and the things the way they'd lived and the things that had happened since. And I was trying my best to apply this academic rigour to this. It was a history thesis at university. The whole time, just like the imagination parts of my brains were pinging about these stories. And I just couldn't shake the thought, how did it feel to live through that? So that was where I came to her story from.
And it's a bit of a love triangle.
It is a bit of a love triangle.
But that's not a spoiler because it happens right at the beginning.
But not too much of a love triangle.
No, so Frances has come over, her family's fallen on hard times.
Yes.
They've come over as settlers to the Taranaki, New Plymouth, and George Farrington, her brother, is like a farmer, so he would have bought a parcel of land.
Yeah,
given that he would have been bought a parcel of land, but he really wants this other bit. There's another bit, obviously, that's looks quite. He really wants to be a bigger and better farmer, and he wants that bit as well. Yeah. And then Frances is unfortunately a spinster, so she's probably all of like 29 or something, but she hasn't got a husband, but she did have a love interest back in
12 years prior
in England. And 12 years prior, and that was who she suddenly sees on the street right at the beginning of the book, and that is Henry, who has come over. So why did Henry come over to New Zealand?
He came over for a series of circumstances which were revealed in the book.
No spoilers.
He was escaping England.
He was escaping England.
He was basically escaping England. He comes to New Zealand. He married a local Māori woman.
Fell in love with
Mataria. And I set that up. I see Henry as a bridge between the two women as well.
So it's really about
the women characters. Because it has them interacting with each other and when they probably wouldn't have otherwise.
Mm. And so it's really about these two quite strong women. Yeah. One who has come from quite a up-class England. Yeah. She's not used to doing the dishes. And she's suddenly making bread and, feeding the chickens. And Mataria, who has been a slave, which was news to me. I mean, I don't know much at all about that.
There's something again. This is another story someone told me when I was young, and it just always stuck in my mind because in Taranaki in the 1830s, the Waikato iwi came down and they waged a series of battles, and after those, they took a number of slaves from Te Aotearoa and Taranaki up north, and many of these slaves were later actually freed by the missionaries. The missionaries put a lot of pressure on Waikato iwi to free the slaves.
So they were enslaved by Māori
by Waikato, yes. Uh-huh. And then they came back and they sat in this weird place where people a lot of them weren't really accepted back where they'd come from. Mm. A lot of time had passed. So I wanted to write a story from a point of view of someone who had been a slave and had come back home to find themselves ostracised by their family.
And they are not in, because it's interesting, because I originally thought the story was about Parihaka, but it's not about Parihaka.
20 years earlier.
It's about Pukeariki
Yeah.
is there.
Yeah.
So is Pukeariki the traditional name for New Plymouth?
Ngamutu is the traditional name for New
Ngamutu.
Plymouth. Pukeariki is the name of the specific papakainga where people used to live. And then it got emptied. It's not a pa anymore. It's a shopping mall.
One of the places your dad would have gone past. And
That.
And so these were displaced people.
Yeah.
From
they became displaced.
this place.
That is true.
And then Mataria and Henry have twin half-caste children.
Yes.
How would they have been treated?
There's a lot of literature. And there's a lot of historical records about. My ancestors were the children of mixed marriages, and I think a lot of it came down to where they decided to sit. But there were a lot of them. I read once that New Zealand had one of the highest rates of intermarriage in all of the colonial structures in the world. I think second to Brazil. So it was quite a common story, and I had them sitting at the papakainga, but others didn't. And I'd like to write a little bit more, I think, about their lives as adults.
How do you think they would have met? How do you think Henry and Mataria would have come across each other?
They could have met in any manner of ways, I suppose. Henry was a labourer before at the time, he was just someone who was just working for coin, as was also common for some of the people that came out to early New Zealand, just kind of picking up odd jobs. And then she was travelling back to Taranaki from the Waikato. Came upon each other. I had a whole bit about all that stuff in one of the early drafts actually, but took it out because it was just...
You've written the backstory.
Just bogged everything down, so I wanted to leave a little bit up to the imagination, I suppose, but that's how I kind of pictured it in my mind.
A big part of the story of Mataria and Francis is Mataria, in any native people, as they referred to, weren't allowed to pass through New Plymouth.
Yeah, that was something that always struck me. You needed a pass to go in central New Plymouth. If you were Māori, you needed to demonstrate that you pledged allegiance to the Queen Victoria, and it became a issue because people didn't want to do that. So that's definitely this part of the book that I do explore.
And she says, why should I pledge allegiance to a queen that's far away, to walk on the land of my ancestors? But that's something else I came across in a book, a historic book about the time, and it's also one of those things that used to pop up in the Waitangi Tribunal submissions. One of the things that I really like about all of your stories is your use of te reo, and you've been on a te reo journey.
I am.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I'm still on a te reo journey. It's one of those things I was joking with someone yesterday actually, that I start to learn te reo and then I give up at some point. But every time I give up, I'm a little bit further along. I didn't grow up speaking te reo. I know a lot of words and kupu, and I'm doing a diploma at the moment in te reo at Nesa University, and I'm at the point now where it's getting pretty hard. And I'm going to need to think about how I carve out time if I'm going to continue, but it's something I'm just going to keep chipping away at, I think. It's very hard to learn a language as an adult.
Do you think you'd write differently in te reo than you would in English?
The main difference, I think, is in te reo Māori we speak a lot more in the passive. And a lot of the challenges I find, like moving between the two, is passive sentences. So I think that's why a lot of Māori writers, and I see it sometimes, through work, I've had to edit work written by people who are native Māori speakers, and a lot of these sentences are in the passive, because that's how te reo Māori is more likely to be constructed.
Could you give an example of that?
I'm sitting on this chair, as opposed to, this is the chair on which I am sitting.
Right, okay.
So maybe that's the main kind of point of difference that I can think of. And also the use of idiom and simile. I think in te reo Māori we use a lot more kiwaha. We call them, simile, idiom, metaphors are woven through speech a lot more freely, as well as whakatoking, proverbs.
I was talking to the teacher at the Te Pawananga on Thursday, and we would talk, because there is a few now children's fiction books written in te reo, but there was also the I mean, there's the translated, quite famously, Harry Potter has been translated into Te Reo.
Potter or something.
And Diary of a Wimpy Kid has been translated. Have you read them?
I've got Diary of a Wimpy Kid at home, actually. It's really quite cool.
And how does it translate?
Well, I'm not sure because my reo's not there yet, but I did give it to my kids, and then they were calling each other this word, and I was like, well, "What's that?" And I looked it up, and it was moron, and they got it from Diary of the Wimpy Kid.
In Te Reo?
In Te Reo, because it was like in the first couple of pages, someone calls someone a moron, and I'm like, "What? I don't know what that kupu is, and what?"
Do your kids?
I assume it's good because I think at the moment there's a recognised need for using proper translators for these things, and I'm far away from being able to translate things properly, I think. I can, and when I wrote this, I just wrote what I know. But it came from my brain in the first place. I think translation's a little bit more of a different exercise.
What I like about these is the reo is just interwoven into the story, and there's not a translation, which used to happen a bit. So it's quite nice that it's not happening now because the story does flow. It lets the word, and as a pākehā, I like it because I go, I know that word, or I'll go and look it up, which is really cool as well because then I want to know that word.
I tried really hard to give enough clues too for people who don't speak te reo. Like, I'd say something in te reo, and then the next person will reply in a way that makes you understand through context what they're talking about. But I've never liked those direct translations because you guys, did anyone watch Brotown, like back in the 2000s? Yeah. And there was that lady, and she'd be like, "Let's go to the whare or house." And that always gave me the blur. So I didn't want to be like Brotown.
I've got a sudden idea. Amorangi Millie. It's so visual. Television program.
I would love that. That would be a very exciting thing if that were to happen, but I guess we just need to keep chipping away and hoping that the right person reads it one day. If there's any television executives sitting here today, you know where I am.
You seem to... I know. Let's do a reading from there first because I wanted to go on to 52 weeks.
Sure.
So let's do a quick... Have we got a reading from Space Between?
I can do a real short one.
Space Between. I implore everybody to read this book.
Thank you.
It is so good. And I was struggling to think, actually, of another Taranaki kind of like a historical fiction set in that time and that place. Someone will tell us, I'm sure.
Aotearoa Maira wrote a book called The Parihaka Woman.
Oh, that's right.
Which came out.
I don't think I read Parihaka Woman, but you're right. Might not be in print still. I don't know.
So this is a paragraph, and it's the moment Mataria and Francis meet. And it's a little bit of the way into the book, but I thought it was quite a good flavour. In the distance, Francis could see Mother talking to the woman from the Floral Society, arms waving in the air. Behind the woman, young soldiers came and went from the public house, most wearing a uniform the same shade of blue as Francis's dress. Closer to the store was a Māori woman in a dress the colour of burlap. She was climbing down from her cart awkwardly. Unlike most other Māori women Francis saw, this one wore no jewellery, not even one of those green pendants around her neck. The woman limped towards where Francis sat. She had striking features, large eyes, full lips, and the woman had ignored almost all rules of propriety and fashion in her dress. She did not wear a bonnet or a cloth cap, and her hands were bare. Nor did she have stays under her dress, let alone a crinoline to keep her skirts wide. Yet she still looked so elegant. How could that be? So that's the first time Francis sees Mataria.
I love how you put your Jane Austen voice on there.
Her stays under her dress and propriety. I love it. That's why I chose that one.
So well done. And, you can really hear each woman's voice, like it's so... Lauren uses the great convention of one chapter for Mataria, one chapter for Francis, and it, you really do hear the woman's voice, and it's also very visual, I have to say. Movie.
Again, TV execs.
So that brings me to another time-travelling adventure that you've been on, Lauren. Your 52-week project, How I Fixed My Life by Trying a New Thing Every Week for a Year. What was so broken about your life?
What was so broken about my life? I wrote this book. It was my first published book, maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, so a while ago. And I just went through this phase where I was just really it was just like a quintessential midlife crisis, really. My life had felt up until that point like I'd been lurching to thing to thing to thing, and I reached this point where I didn't really have a lot of the structures around me anymore. My children were at an age where things were just quite hard. Me and my husband had marital issues, which we've now resolved, and he's lovely sitting over there, so always feel slightly awkward talking about marital issues when you're sitting right there. But anyway, I wrote the book about it back then. And my career was kind of at a place where you're kind of like, oh, I don't really know whether this is actually what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I just went through this phase as well when I just kind of was making really bad habits. I was in a lot of really bad habits. I was in a massive rut. And I was extremely lonely.
Was it when you'd come out of... How old were your children?
My kids were like 3 and 5.
And so you'd come out of that really nappy, kind of time.
The nappy time. And
you'd surfaced, through the sea of nappies.
And the future just opens in front of you, like this giant chasm. Like, who am I? I'm a person in my own right, and then I'm a mum, and then after being a mum, who am I again? And I had a lot of friends, but I didn't really have people that I felt like I could really rely on a day-to-day basis. And I had this one day when I went to the movies, and I just really wanted to see this movie, and I just went real crazy to try and find someone to go with, and I invited 27 people to come with me. In the book, I call it the 27 Rejections of Doom. I was like one of those Facebook groups with people I kind of randomly know. Anyone want to go to this movie? And nobody wanted to go to the movies with me. So I went by myself and just felt like a giant lame-o. And then I just thought afterwards, something's got to shift in my life. I've got to try something new. So then I decided to try 52 new things, because I don't do things by halves. And then I did a new thing every day, every week for a year, 52 new things. And I wrote a book about it, because new thing 53 was write the book.
A year's a long time.
A year is a long time, and it was cool though, because I'm sure we're all the same, right? There's things that you think you kind of want to do, but if you give yourself permission to do them and you still haven't done them within the end of the year, you're going to have to admit that it's just, you're kind of lying to yourself the entire time. But then there's other things that I thought I didn't want to do, and then I did them. I fed lions and I swam with sharks, and I did a lot of things that involved being up high, because I hate being up high.
Was this after you'd come back to New Zealand, or was it before?
It was before. It was before we moved to Hawaii. Yeah, so I was in Wellington, and the weather was miserable, and I started doing these new things, and it was just great. And for me, because I love writing as well, writing was part of me processing what I was going through and finding my peace again and finding my happiness. Not necessarily because there was more people around me, but because I became a lot more comfortable with being who I was by myself. I think that was the main learning that I got from that.
This is the scary thing. You didn't just think up the new things by yourself.
No, I crowdsourced it. And it was really cool too, because I did a whole bunch of new stuff that I never would have done otherwise. Because some people were like, oh, I've always wanted to do this or this or this. Like stand-up comedy. One of my friends was like, I've always wanted to try stand-up comedy. Do you want to do it? And I was like, I guess it's the year of new things. I'll give it a go. And it was cool too, because when you talk to other people about the kind of things that I've always kind of wanted to do, you kind of get to know them a little bit better. So I ended up getting to know the people around me a little bit better, because I got a glimpse into kind of their hopes and dreams in a way. Or, my mum had always wanted to eat a vodka-infused donut, because I'd never heard of them. So we went and we ate vodka-infused donuts. And somebody else had always wanted to try mountain biking. I went mountain biking for the first time, which I just loved, and it's something I still do now.
I was going to say, what stuck with you?
The mountain biking is definitely the one that stuck more than anything else, because I'm sure not doing stand-up comedy again. It was terrifying.
And you talk about, at the beginning of the book, I've been thinking a little bit about this. I went into the tea room at my work the other day, and I just walked in on a conversation and they said, I'm really sick of how women get judged for their appearance all the time. Yeah. And part of Lauren's book is this terrible experience that I'm sure it's one of those experiences that has happened to you when you were 15, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's stuck with you for the rest of your life.
And I think because when I was 15, the boys at school decided I was the third ugliest person at school.
So is that what happened? The boys decided?
It was a group of boys.
Was there a boy competition?
I don't.
Or was it just a girl competition?
To be fair, I was only really the results were shared with me with glee, and I'm sure it wasn't necessarily a democratic process. And also because I knew number 1 and 2, and I thought they looked fine to me. But being voted the third ugliest girl at school by a group of boys when you're 15 was just one of those little things that had always gotten into my head. So the first thing I started with the Year of New Things was how can I just feel more confident in who I am? So I at first went down this path of like a lot of vanity stuff really. Like I got false eyelashes, which caused my natural eyelashes to fall out. So I had like no eyelashes, which was kind of like a own goal. I like got a manicure. I got a beauty counter makeover, which was so, for me, it was just so terrifying because there's a lot of mirrors in there, you're like in there and the artistry with your face, and then I did all those things, and I did about 10 new things all related to how I looked. Then at some point I realised I didn't actually feel any better. I didn't actually feel any better in myself. So I moved very quickly to things about making myself strong. You know, I entered a push-up competition, which again was, I had to train with the push-ups, and that felt a lot better than anything aesthetic.
How many push-ups did you have to do for the competition?
I can't remember. It was like there was like 5 people going at once, and it was like timed how many you can do in a minute.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I don't remember what it was, but I can absolutely guarantee it's a lot more than I could do right now.
So that's not stuck.
So that's not stuck. So then I started to do things that actually helped me kind of, you know, we often start on the outside and then you kind of go further in, and that's where things become more and more uncomfortable. Because you're thinking about shoes and old things. But during the course of the year, that's where the healing was. And it was just feeling more confident.
And it's interesting because lockdown came after that.
Yeah, I did.
If lockdown had come before that, how do you think you would have coped?
I honestly don't know. And I feel incredibly privileged for me that the lockdown happened at a time where I could react by writing novels rather than all manner of other things that could be really, really tough.
Do you think the 52-week, all the things, focused you in on the things that really mattered to you?
They really did, especially because I love doing new things, and I'll never say no to, well, I will say no to some new things because there are some things that actually came my way during the course of that year. I realised where my boundaries actually were. The main one was being a life model. I'm not joking, because one of my friends had been a life model, and she was like, it'll be great, you can do it. And I actually had it, and then I had a lot of, something always came up that day, you know. I was like, oh, I'm sick today, and I'd postpone it, and at some point I just realised, you know, I'm never going to be a life model.
And tell me about the social media detox.
I went on a social media detox as part of it because I was getting really addicted to doom scrolling and being online, and it was just doing things to my brain. And I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of reading of psychology while I was writing that book, which I talk about in the book. And I went offline for a while, and it was really interesting, I think, going back to the history kind of angle, because going offline, parts of it were really good, but I also disconnected. I disconnected a little bit because, you know, one of my friends had a baby and I never found out about it because it was only posted online. So part of my journey, especially as a historian, is recognising that there's some things that are here to stay. We just need to find a way of coping better with them. And that's what the social media detox taught me.
And you started writing letters.
I did start writing letters, which I just loved because I wrote letters to people that I used to know at school or some of my family. Because one thing about the modern age, which is a real shame, I think, is we're kind of like descending a lot of our communications into,
because in the old days
emojis
you would have got a card about the baby.
Yeah, I would have got a card,
or you know, like you would have seen it in the newspaper or something like that. But nowadays,
yeah. And my great aunt, she died when I was 20, and she died when she was in her 90s. But I've still got her letters, and I've still got her words and her handwriting, and I've still got the splodges on the paper that she'd bought specially for her letter writing paper. and I think it's a real shame not to go back to that, and especially as a historian too, because a lot of my sources for the space between came from letters. There's this amazing book that's been written and published about, it's just a compilation of letters that women wrote women in colonial New Zealand. It's called My Hand Will Write What My Heart Dictates. And in 100, 200 years' time, I just don't know what they're going to call it. There will TikToks from
they won't exist.
Women or...
But they won't. But that's the thing with emailing and things, like it all just goes into the ether. Like it's no permanence of it, like the whole social media thing. Like it just gets, after a while, it's just gone. How will they even find out what we've talked about? They'll listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
But those personal things, that personal correspondence.
But there were parts of writing the letters that I also didn't love. Like my hands got really sore. When I was at high school and I used to write notes to my friends in class all the time, I must have had just stronger hands. And the other weird thing about writing all these letters is I kind of missed emojis. I hadn't realised how dependent I'd become on emojis in all of my communications, Sometimes nothing says it better than the smiley face with the glasses or the So I wrote these letters, but I wrote all these smiley faces in them, which had never happened before. So I guess that's me moving with the times.
I've got a couple of more questions, but I thought we would ask other people what they thought I should have asked you. We have got a microphone somewhere that we will pass around. Sorry, I forgot to say that at the beginning, that if you do have a question at the end, which is now, if you wouldn't mind putting your hand up and we'll bring you the microphone, so please do wait till the microphone does come to you before the question is asked. Thank you.
Hi, Lauren. What was your favourite 52 thing that you did in that year of new things?
My favourite? I think it was the mountain biking, because it's something so basic. And it's weird when you there's things that everyone seems to have done, and I just never did. And when I went mountain biking, I was like, why didn't I do this ages ago? And I bought a bike, and it's given me a hobby, like a residual hobby, that I really do enjoy. I mean, I live at the base of a mountain bike park, and I'd never been on a mountain bike. So I think that was probably the one that's given me the most moving forward. But there were so many other ones that were just so much fun. Like going parasailing. It was scary but awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed the parasailing as well.
Kia ora. I do have a question, but I do just have to say, you just stressed me out so much for something you said that my watch has told me I've got an abnormal heart rate and to breathe. And it's, on the daily, I feel like my kids are killing me. But they're 1 and 3, and you said, my kids were just at that stage when they were just really hard. They were 3 and 5. I'm like, oh my God.
Maybe it was just my kids.
The question that I actually had was going back to Amorangi and Millie and the work that you were putting into that. And you were talking about how in Māori, our histories and our stories, they're oral. And obviously that's quite different to what we have now where it's written. As you came across those waiata and those motiatia and those ori, did you share those with your children as well?
I think there's kind of a second order effect of first we're going on a reo journey first, because I don't really want to be I don't want to be sharing with them the translated motiatia and waiata because they're just not the same. They kind of miss a lot of the cadence. So I certainly will. And that reo is improving, but that's definitely one of the goals at the end of it, was for them to be able to read a motiatia and see it and see themselves in it and understand it without having to run it through Te Aka Māori dictionary.
Any other questions? Nothing burning. Let's see what I had. I thought of one when you were talking. I was like, that was my question. I was going to ask, what kind of school do your kids go to? Do they go to a normal primary?
They go to a bog standard Wellington Primary School.
We went to Te Pawananga. I was so inspired by that school.
We actually did think about sending my oldest to kaupapa when he was 4. But at that time, my life, it was around the 52-week project time, to be honest, and I just didn't have the mental capacity to deal with the real responsibilities that set on me at that time. But now I'd be able to do it, and I think, we have our lives, and there are different times for different things in different parts of your own journey. So I don't regret not sending them to a kura kaupapa. But having said that, I still think now is a time that we're all upskilling in this way, in a way that I hope will help them stand firmer in their own futures.
Thank you, Lauren. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Lauren, I'm so glad you've written the books that you have. They talk to us as people, and they make us think about history, and they ask us, is that all there is? They make us want to be brave. That's what I wanted to say to you about that book. You were so brave in that book. I could never have done that, particularly what other people said. I would have made the things up myself, and they would have been really easy. It would have been read 52 different books. I could have done that. I've loved getting to know you and sharing your obvious thirst for knowledge, passion for history and writing, and curiosity for life. And thank you for sharing that with the Marlborough community today. So, ka kite anō. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great.
Can I just say, Lauren will be signing books out in the foyer, and there are all of these books except for this one, because unfortunately it has gone out of print, sold so well. You can, however, get it. It's got a really good audio book on Belinda Through the Library, or on Audible if you're on Audible, or it is also available at the library. But if enough people want to buy it, they'll print another. They'll do another print run. So So Lauren will be with you out in the foyer soon. Thank you.